Hey everyone, it's Ansi. In today's video, let's talk about line art. I'll show you what tools I use to do my lines, how I pick colors for line art, and also how to make a fine line. My favorite fine liners are definitely Copic Multiliners. These fine liners are made by the same company in Japan that makes Copic markers. You can usually find these in your local art stores. Or if you can't, you can always order online from Amazon. I've been using Copic Multiliners for several years now, and I think that they're really high quality liners. The ink dries very quickly, so I seldom have any issues of smudging, and also they have a very nice selection of colors to choose from. On the barrel, you can see the nib size and the color. So this one is a 0.03mm nib, and the color is sepia. You can also see that the liner is water and Copic proof. So what this means is that the fine liner ink won't bleed or smudge even if you apply Copic ink or watercolor on top. So here are all of the Copic multiliner colors that I have. So the sepia color that I have is one of my most frequently used and favorite colors because it's just so versatile. I can use it for skin, for hair, for food, basically anything that you can think of. And then here we have this wine color, which I use for shadows because I don't like to use black too much. And this is a warm gray, so I use it to line things that are supposed to be white. So for example, vanilla ice cream or like a white t-shirt. So here we have these cool colors, right? And obviously you can use like lavender or pink or green anytime you like, but cool colors tend to make people feel calm and relaxed. So you just need to think about what exactly it is that you want people to feel in your art, and then choose either warm colors or cool colors accordingly. So finally we have this black color, which I don't really use a lot because it's a little bit too heavy for my style, but if you like a black liner for Inktober or black and white manga, this is a really good choice. Before we move on, I just want to make one quick point about line art color. Let's compare the pictures on the right and the left. They're the same pictures, but if we change the line art color, the entire mood and aesthetic become different. At the end of the day, line art color is part of your style. There's really no right or wrong color to use. So please have fun experimenting to find the colors that you like the best. For eye highlights and hair highlights, I usually use the Sakura Gelly Roll gel pen. It's not expensive, but the ink is very opaque, so I highly recommend it. So for eraser, I use this soft kneaded eraser from Faber Castell. I like this a lot because it's soft, and all it does is that it absorbs the graphite from the pencil. And unlike a plastic eraser, it doesn't create those like little eraser bits or whatever you call them when you erase. So later in the video, I will show you how I actually use this eraser. Let's do a quick demo with 3 different nib sizes. If you like doing really thin line art, then you should definitely go for the smallest nib possible. For Copic Multiliners, the smallest nib is 0.03mm. This is my personal favorite nib because all of my drawings are pretty small. My sketchbooks are usually no bigger than A5 size paper. So why don't we try this 0.1mm nib? So you can see here that the 0.1 nib actually isn't that much thinner compared to the 0.03 nib. Then here we have the 0.3mm nib. So you might be thinking, does this mean that I have to buy all these different nib sizes if I want to vary my line weight? If you learn to control your line weight, you might only need to buy one nib. So here I'm using the 0.3 nib again. By adjusting your stroke, you can use it to draw a line that's just as thin as the 0.1 or the 0.03. For the purposes of demonstration, I filmed this part in slow motion. The key to making a fine line is to be light and fast with your hand. Use only the smallest part of the nib. This will reduce the amount of ink released onto the paper. Never push the nib onto the paper hard because this might actually ruin the nib. I want to show you a bit of my line art process and also answer some questions that I received on Instagram about line art. A lot of people have said that their lines are very shaky and they asked for advice on how to keep the hand steady. I think what's happening there is that your hand muscles are probably not yet used to handling a fine liner. For example, if you write something with a pencil, would your hand be shaky? Probably not, right? That's because your hand has had enough training with writing with a pencil. So obviously you need to keep practicing with a fine liner to gain confidence, but I also have a few suggestions if you want to try and steady your hand. Number 1, make sure that you're not drawing lines from awkward directions or angles. For example, I'm a right-handed person, and my hand feels good when I draw lines from left to right. I tend to avoid drawing from right to left if possible because when I do that, my hand doesn't feel good and my lines end up being shaky. My second suggestion is that you should try to turn the page around to allow your hand to draw at a comfortable angle. You can see here that I'm constantly turning around my sketchbook when I'm looking for a comfortable position to do my lines. My third and final tip is that if you're not able to handle a fine liner confidently yet, keep your lines short. It's hard to keep your hand steady when you draw one long continuous line, but doing short lines make it a lot easier. Some people have asked me on Instagram how we can avoid smudging our line art. So smudging happens because there's too much ink on the paper and it hasn't dried yet. When you buy a new fine liner, you can test it out a bit before you draw with it to see how long the ink takes to dry. Different brands of liners dry at different speeds. For Copic Multiliner and Sakura Micron, I find that these liners dry almost instantly, and I've never really had issues of smudging when I use these liners. Now that my line art is done, I'm gonna erase my pencil draft with my kneaded eraser. I like to roll my eraser across the page so that the eraser will absorb the pencil's graphite. Erasing too hard may end up smudging the lines and ruining the paper. You don't have to get the soft eraser, but whatever eraser you use, just be gentle with it when you erase the pencil lines. Thank you so much for watching until the end. It seems like someone is getting kinda sleepy, so why don't we just call it a day. See you next time!